So I want you to think of the limbic system. And the term limbic actually comes from Paul Broca, who wrote a paper back in the 19th century that delineated, this kind of medial, mid-sagittal region here, the areas, including the cingulate gyrus, right, that forms a border around the corpus callosum, all these areas that border the corpus callosum. He called this the border lobe, or the Latin is limbus, so the limbic lobe, this region here. And I want you to think of the limbic system as sort of the PAPE circuit. It's sort of a core element of it, obviously. These are areas that are involved in emotional experience and expression. But plus, there are other structures, that were also important, that fed in and out of, these sort of core PAPE circuit structures. So that included a very, very important nucleus that we're going to be, talking about a bit more, known as the amygdala. And, even when we go out to, classrooms, even K through 3 classrooms, actually, many classrooms are using something called the Mind Up curriculum now. They're learning about, their security guard, which is this almond-shaped nucleus deep here in the anterior portion of the temporal lobe, that's known as the amygdala. And it feeds in and out of, a lot of different places, has a lot of interconnectivity with the hippocampus, for example. The amygdala is really interesting. It actually receives lots of, thalamic afferent information, like, from, derived from ears and eyes and body, mouth, gustatory inputs, things like that. And also higher level kinds of inputs, from, visual cortical regions and other areas of the brain. And it has outputs, to alter, the emotional state of the body, right? It can have autonomic outputs where it can, significantly enhance sympathetic activation, right? You can get a very powerful sympathetic, kind of jolt from amygdala activation. It can, stimulate the HPA axis, right? The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis for a, powerful sort of stress response. It has direct projections into the brainstem, that allow allow for stereotypes or freezing behaviors or orienting behaviors, etc. So the amygdala is, very well placed to respond rapidly, to stimuli, that are indicative of potential threat or, require, significantly enhanced arousal orienting, and sort of adjustments in, emotional state, that are, quite intense typically. And, so all these regions, the limbic system form a border, the limbus around the brainstem. There are actually 4 areas of paleocortex that are very important to the limbic system too. The cingulate gyrus, which we've talked about, remember the anterior cingulate, towards the front in the middle of the brain there, receives hypothalamic input about the internal milieu via the thalamus, right? It's part of that PAPE circuit. It also, that anterior cingulate receives quite a bit of insular, processed, internal gut, visceral, emotionally salient input, right? Very important node in distributed networks, that are involving salience, right? And where you're going to direct your attention and things like that. The hippocampus, another ancient region of paleocortex, very important for, transferring, current experience into more preserved forms of, longer-term memory. An area called the entorhinal cortex, which is around the hippocampus. An area called the septal area, which is sort of embedded, in the frontal lobe, in here. Areas like the nucleus accumbens, targets of the dopaminergic pathways, the mesolimbic pathways, for example, the hypothalamus. All of these are going to be limbic structures, and they are involved in emotional experience and